Part of me wishes we were able to clip in us talking about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives to the beginning of this as a cold open because that was cracking me up. But here we are.
Yeah, that's okay.
Here we are. That is for after hours.
My complicated feelings about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives aside, let's talk about AAC.
Not within the scope of speech language pathology. Anyways.
Unfortunately, no.
All right, let's do this. Welcome to Tell Me About It, a podcast by SLPs for everybody. My name is Francie.
And my name is Maggie.
And today we are continuing our conversation about AAC. Where we left off last time was introducing you guys to the concepts of AAC, right? Kind of an introductory course. And this episode is going to be focusing on, great, now what do I do as a therapist and also as a family member? So.
Yeah, very much so. I am especially excited to talk about this because I feel like, and this, I'm not assigning fault or blame here. I think I'm just pointing out like an oversight / area for improvement. I think that we are really good at getting AAC into the hands of kids, and then it kind of tends to fall apart from there. And the unfortunate truth is, if you have a kid with a language disorder and you throw an iPad at them, nothing is going to happen. Like, great, you have just given them an $800 or more toy. So when we see AAC get left in the backpack, when we see AAC, the kid manages to get out of guided access and get onto YouTube, they always figure it out so fast. And they're not using it for what it's intended to be. I think that our implementation strategies and our like kind of therapy approach has a lot to do with that. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. And kind of going off of implementation strategies, I want to highlight a point that we made in the last episode, but I think we're going to make this point at least every episode because it is so important. And I looked up the quote this time to make sure I got it right, which is, an 18-month-old child has been exposed to 4,380 waking hours of oral language. A typical AAC user exposed to modeling 2 times a week for 30 minutes would take 84 years to get the same level of exposure as an 18-month-old does to oral language. And so that is our driving fact for the day as to why implementation is so important for AAC users.
Yes, that fact is absolutely haunting. Like, you told me that for the first time after you did pod training.
Mm-hmm.
And I have thought about it probably once a week ever since. It's wild, wild.
It runs across my brain like a ticker tape when I'm at work. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, and I think it just like really drives home because we can do something about that, right? Like, we as therapists can intervene and change that statistic for a child or for the children on our caseload. And I feel like I want to point out too that exposure to AAC is never going to be as much as verbal language unless it was a household of like all AAC users, or they took the approach that some bilingual households do of like, if you're teaching your children ASL, you have voice off time, and only sign. If it was like, oh, we only use AAC during this time, we have voice off time. But that's pretty unrealistic for most families. So there's always going to be that discrepancy there. But we as therapists can do a lot to close that gap in a really big way.
I think this is not on our outline, I'm sorry. I think one of the things that can really aid us in that endeavor is buy-in from families and buy-in from other educators. They are at school or wherever. If you're at school, I'm a school therapist. Here we are again, living through my lived experience or talking through my lived experience. We're at school for 7 hours a day. If we can expand our AAC modeling use from just our 30-minute sessions 2 times a week to 7 hours a day at school, that is already gaining so much ground to those hours of modeling, right? And so buy-in is so important for the whole team. There we go.
Yeah. And I think as we talk about some of these implementation strategies or kind of points, tips and tricks, things we should be thinking about. If you are a parent, caregiver, or other provider, like a non-SLP provider, teacher, OT, what have you, hopefully listening to us talk about some of these strategies that we're thinking through will also help you learn how to implement AAC from a non-therapeutic standpoint, because there is definitely a difference between what we expect parents and other caregivers and therapy providers to be doing to support AAC use. There's a difference between that and what we are doing therapeutically in sessions. And there should be a difference, right? Like, this is, caregiver buy-in is so important. Carryover in the home is so important, but parents are not speech therapists. That's not their job. Their job is to be parent. So we don't want to put an undue burden on them, I suppose.
And I think kind of messaging over the past few years has kind of not shied away from, but has not highlighted the importance of directly teaching AAC. And so I think that's part of the reason why we wanted to talk about it today, is because direct teaching is not something to be scared of. It can be neurodiversity affirming, and it can be interest-based, but still doing therapeutic dosage of direct teaching, right? And so we have these strategies that we can use to help us do some really intense teaching of AAC.
Yes, yes, yes. Retweet, cosign a million times. Yes. Love that. Direct teaching is nothing to be afraid of. And in fact, it is oftentimes the best thing for our students. So let's get into some implementation strategies. Francie, you were reading off some earlier, or like,
yes.
Yeah. Do you want to read those off again? Or
Yeah,
kind of get back into
we
that?
have some of the three of the bigger strategies that I see are enhanced milieu teaching, modeling without expectation, and modeling with expectation. We can also talk a little bit about the prompting hierarchy. That goes for more than just AAC. That also goes for other therapies. I think PTs, you have a prompting hierarchy. OTs have a prompting, everybody uses a prompting hierarchy, but we can also talk about that here. But with that, I want to start with modeling without expectation. That is the phrase that I see online the most when it comes to talking about AAC.
Yes, I agree. This is something I think has kind of like taken over the conversation about AAC online, which is great. Modeling without expectation is very important, but it is not always therapeutic. And I think that there is an important distinction there too. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, so modeling without expectation is where the non-AAC user is modeling use of the device without the expectation of the AAC user repeating it, completing things, just showing of the device. And while it is an implementation strategy, I'm going to recommend to you all to kind of take this as a resting state. You should be modeling all the time, always. That's just how I operate specifically. And I'm speaking to mostly professionals here. So for school providers, for teachers, for SLPs in school, we should always be modeling on the device kind of as a resting state, because it's always good to get that extra exposure. However, it's not necessarily therapeutic insofar that it's not directly teaching things. It's important. Don't mishear what I just said, okay?
Mhm.
It's so important. Modeling without expectations helps to alleviate some of that load off of our AAC users so they don't feel pressure or get stuck in that like kind of analysis paralysis of language, which can definitely happen. And so it's a fun, easy way to support connection and also teach AAC, which is great. Not saying it's not. However, I like to view it more as a resting state as opposed to a direct teaching strategy.
Yeah, I think that sometimes modeling without expectation is also like a diving board into, or like a springboard into more therapeutic kind of direct teaching strategies. Yeah. If you have a kid that is also working on things like joint attention, shared enjoyment, or has maybe is a neurodivergent learner that has a different way of experiencing those pieces of social language, this can be a really cool and effective way to get them to realize, oh, wait a second, this device helps me communicate. This device helps me gain access to the things that I want. This device helps me connect with this adult that's in my sphere, right? So showing them what it can do for them is really, really important. And so it can kind of be like an entry point for a lot of students. But I don't think as therapists, we should only model without expectation forever.
You put that better than I did. So
I don't think so at all.
because this is also a strategy that I love to give to parents, because I feel like this is a great place for them to be focusing on that connection and also just kind of showing the device, because it is the best place to just kind of get some exposure. It is kind of that entry level point, and I love that. It's very universal. It's very applicable for situations, and it's very low pressure for not just the AAC user, but also, good point, Maggie, for the person showing it. Like, it can be a little bit more low pressure, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But you're right. It is not the only thing therapists should be doing during their sessions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So modeling expectation, or modeling without expectation, what does that actually look like in practice? Like, what are some examples of that?
Absolutely. I will be talking to another student and just be saying what I'm saying with the device. It doesn't have to be word for word. It can just be kind of the biggest words of the utterance that I'm making. So if I'm going up to a student and we haven't started working on our session yet, I'm greeting them with their device, right? It's saying like, hey buddy, how's your day going? And finding those messages in the device too, or kind of talking while using the device. Or, if you're at the grocery store with your child, being like, okay, we got to get apples. We got to get some milk on the device, right? And so kind of using it in conjunction with what you are saying without the expectation of them repeating or saying anything back. We're just showing them.
Very much so. Yeah. I think we have talked before, maybe in our like behavior and language episode, about doing the show pony thing with kids of like,
or the repeat 3 times kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about the when toddlers kind of begin speaking more. And so parents with the best of intentions will say like, oh, like we're going to go to McDonald's. Where are we going? Say McDonald's. Tell auntie we're going to McDonald's. Tell her, like that kind of like force.
Gotcha. So I'm tracking
that
now.
Would be like modeling verbal language with expectation of them
absolutely
saying it back. And so like the way that would look for AAC is like, if you're at the grocery store, okay, we need to get apples. Say apples. What do we need to get? Apples. Tell me apples. Like that type of a thing. So to your point, I think that's a beautiful example. It's just you showing them how to use the device and making it more of like I feel like the biggest thing that this teaches kids is what the device does, like what it is for, because otherwise, I mean, they're new here. They're little. They have learning differences and a language disorder. So what is an iPad to them, right? Other than usually just entertainment or a toy. So this modeling without expectation, I think, is vital for teaching them what AAC is and what it can do for them.
Absolutely. With that, you started talking about modeling with expectation, which it does turn into that everything's a test now. And I feel like there's a way that quizzing. Yes, I think there's a way that you can do it without it being a total quiz show, which is in those situations where you've modeled with that expectation. Think of it, I don't know, I like to do this more with like a core word approach, where I have modeled the pathways for these things, and now we're moving into an activity using this core word, and then we're using those prompting strategies or that hierarchy, introducing some wait time. So like if we're doing bubbles and we're working on more, I've modeled, I want more bubbles, and then I hand the device over and say, perhaps more bubbles, and just wait to see if they
and also, for the lady, more bubbles.
And perhaps you would like to select on the device more. And giving them some wait time to see if they will select. So that was modeling with expectation. I'm kind of showing you the device. I'm giving you the space to see if you are going to select more. And then if they don't, I will model without expectation and move on. We're not going to withhold for ages and ages, because that's just mean. But giving them the opportunity and the space to just see if they're going to make that selection. I've modeled. I'm giving you an expectation, a little bit of wait time, a little bit of, hey, this could be cool. Just to see if they're going to make that selection by themselves. So modeling with expectation is that, but it can easily become the quiz show, which is not fun for anybody.
Yeah, very much so. And I will say, sometimes I am a mean therapist and I will lightly withhold. And I don't mean getting into a power struggle where the kid is screaming, crying, tantruming on the ground because I withheld something, waiting for a skill that they don't have to, like people, I think adults, well-meaning adults tend to put really big language expectations on kids. If it's something like, if it's bubbles that I have modeled for them 1,000 times, I have seen them do on their own before, I might lightly withhold bubbles until I see them asking for it. Because there is also like a social expectation piece of language where like when you say something to someone, you expect a response back. And that kind of give and take of conversation is also an important thing to teach to our young communicators. So I never withhold to the point of frustration, but I will sometimes say, you want bubbles, model. You want bubbles. Tell me bubbles, and then wait. So it's that kind of explicit with the expectation, tell me, and again, accepting all forms of communication. So if they can verbally say bubbles, they get bubbles. If they sign bubbles or pop or more, they get bubbles. If they use their device, they get it. But it is gently withholding until I see the skill.
Well, it's also important to know, I think really well-meaning people can also bulldoze opportunities for communication by just blasting through that kind of pause where potentially the child might do something communicative, right? And so not giving them the opportunity to make that decision for themselves as to whether they're going to say, sign, or use AAC in that moment by just blasting over and modeling, I think you're kind of missing out on some opportunities there. And so giving that beat or that pause in your kind of flow of communication could open up opportunities for more communication and more connection as well. So
for sure. And I will say, like, if I give them that pause, give them the expectation, like, tell me bubbles, and they start to fuss and reach for the bubbles, I'll say, oh, you're showing me you want it, and I'll model again and then give it to them.
Beautiful.
Because it's not about getting them so frustrated that they don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like it's still that I want to keep that social connection strong, and their trust in me as an adult very strong, so that we can continue to have productive therapy time.
Absolutely. I'm never going to be the mean old speech therapist, because that's just, nobody likes to communicate with somebody they hate. So withholding to the point of frustration hurts everybody in that situation.
Yes. And you and I have both said one thing I'm not going to do is get into a power struggle with a toddler. Okay.
No. I refuse to have active beef with an 8-year-old. So I'm not doing that. If that just means that I'm going to model instead because I see you really wanting it, I will model on the device and still give you the bubbles.
Yeah. And I think all of this modeling with expectation is really more directed at speech therapists. Like this is a bit more of like a therapeutic thing. It's less something that I would be expecting. I would definitely encourage parents to use wait time, but giving the child space to communicate how they will, but then, not really doing the like, the quiz thing, the tell me type of deal, because that's not their job either. Their job is be mom. Their job is be dad,
Yep, absolutely. Kind of leading into the last real kind of therapeutic technique, advanced milieu teaching, enhanced milieu teaching. This is where you and I live, and you and I live here so much that we actually forgot the name of it before the episode.
When we were talking about these like off mic earlier or before we started recording, Francie was like, oh, enhanced milieu teaching. I was like, yeah, what is that again? And then she described it and I was like, oh, what I do in therapy all the time, and just forgot the name of, because it's become so second nature to us that like it's so baked in. I don't think about like, yes, now the steps of milieu teaching. I'm like, no, this is my job. I do it like in therapy.
Absolutely. So the definition for enhanced milieu teaching is as follows. a naturalistic, play-based approach that teaches communication by modeling language, arranging the environment, and responding to the child's interests to create meaningful opportunities for them to communicate. This includes expansion and child-led interactions. This is from Speaking AAC's Instagram page. I thought that was a beautiful definition that they used. So this is where I live a lot of the time, which is following children's leads. Following child's leads. Hello, I don't know what's happening. Anyways, I follow their lead. We're going to get there eventually. We follow their lead. We're setting up our environment to promote these kind of opportunities for language and modeling while we're doing that and expanding upon what we see with them. It's this very dynamic give and take, follow their lead with direct teaching involved. That can look like, if I've got a kid who's really interested in animals, we can do a play scene with the Little People Animal Farm or a zoo set or whatever, and we're picking a few targets from that and really focusing on finding those pathways in the AAC device, teaching the words of that while following their interests, following what they say, and then pairing those two things together. So
yeah. Yes, at my office, I will generally, so the kids know, even my toddlers learn immediately that my toy cabinet contains many wonders. And they often want to go over and dig around and look for whatever looks cool, whatever is novel, whatever they haven't played with yet. And that's totally fine for when we're building rapport, but I try to move away from that really quickly and make the cabinet be off limits because I want to control what the options are. And not in a mean way, in a therapeutic way, because if we're working on a really specific skill and they pull out a toy that they've never played with before, the number of like trials or like instances for me to implement like a therapeutic training of this skill hits the floor because now we're just playing with the toy, we're exploring it. And again, sometimes that's totally fine, but when you only have 30 minutes with a child, and some of my private clients, it's 30 minutes once a week because they're itty bitty and that's about what our attention span can handle. I want to be very selective and very careful about the toys that I pull. And I usually will pull 4 options for them, like something new, something we haven't done before, something that we have maybe done before, but not as often, a favorite of theirs. So like if they're really into trucks, I'll pull out the box of trucks, and then like an old standby, like bubbles or jump spots, something like that, a spinner toy. So that way, if they get bored with one thing, we can move on to something else. But I have a plan for each one of those things, and I know how I'm going to use each of those materials to implement their goal. So yeah, it's not a free-for-all, but it is still play-based and it is still child-led within the parameters of me as the therapist.
Absolutely. If I know a kid loves Pop the Pig, we are going to be working on colors and core words like nobody's business using Pop the Pig. And I've got some kids who are obsessed with that game. To be fair, so am I. And so using that activity that I know that they like and enjoy to help structure teaching of different colors, of words like in and push and some of those kind of more core style stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do that in that follow their lead. We're playing something you like. We're, if you say something that's totally out of the like, oh, wow, you're surprised that I'm expanding upon your utterance. Anyways, that's kind of where we live. That's what we do.
Yeah, 100%. Apparently it's called enhanced milieu teaching.
And I remember learning about this in an early childhood context because I feel like that strategy is used not just for AAC teaching, but also some of those more early childhood, early communication stuff too. So this is something that you can use beyond just AAC in other realms. So.
Very much. Yeah, I use this with my my early intervention and early childhood clients. Like this is my bread and butter for sure. And yes, with kids working on verbal language and kids working on AAC. So yeah. We have talked a little bit about what we would target in a session. We talked a bit about like requesting more, like with bubbles, that kind of thing. You touched on what you would use Pop the Pig to target. So let's talk about kind of maybe the functions of communication and things that we would be using AAC to communicate. Because it's more than just requesting.
It's more than just requesting. And I think people forget how far we use communication for. Oftentimes, I see it kind of reduced down to just requesting and protesting, which I feel like is important. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Don't come for me. It is important to help get our needs met and kind of eliminate some of that early frustration with communication. But we can do so much more with it and do things that we can get a lot of mileage out of if we were to target other functions, because we can request and protest. We can also make comments about the things around us. Complaining is a function of language. Gossiping is a function of language. Those are higher functions, but they are functions nonetheless.
For sure.
They are functions nonetheless. Requesting cessation and like dictating things to stop. Dictating
reporting
play and
is another one.
Reporting is so important. There are so many other functions of communication that we can be targeting beyond just requesting and protesting that will get you more mileage in the long run, both therapeutically and also just communicatively. But we can do that. One of my favorites is commenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said off mic earlier, like commenting is a way to get a lot of bang for your buck therapeutically. Do you want to I guess kind of explain like what you meant by that?
Absolutely, because commenting, you can work socially on commenting because when you're making comments, you're doing that for your communication partner to hear. So you're working on connection, on not just saying this to another person, but also you two are talking about something that's in common. And so you're working kind of on that social communication aspect. You're working on, from a more holistic language standpoint, you're working on things like adjectives and description words too, which helps to build vocabulary really well. And so by just working on commenting, you've now hit social communication, you've hit descriptions, adjectives, and like that kind of aspect of receptive language or expressive language. Then you also, by teaching commenting back, are working on receptive language and some of those, even going further into like qualitative concepts too, of the basic concept realm. And you've done all that just by, talking about something in your environment. And I love that.
And if we think about it, this is a natural function of language that typically developing verbal communicators go through. Like I was saying, and I'll try and find it on Instagram and like stitch it or something and put it on our Instagram account. It's not called stitching. I don't know what it's called on Instagram. I can't remember, but, it's this dad and his little son who's a toddler, and he takes his son on bike rides with him and has them in a little car seat on his bike, and he records their ride together, and the little boy is just commenting. Like he'll say, "Daddy, fence, Daddy, duck, Daddy, puddle." And then he like will ask for snacks. He says, "Daddy, snacks," that kind of thing. That is so typical, so appropriate, and such an amazing function of language because, yeah, to your point, you're getting the social piece. He's talking to his dad about things he sees in his environment during this activity that they're doing together. Dad is responding to it. And dad, in the video, dad is biking. So it's not like long, elaborate, like, yes, the yellow duck in the pond. Like, no, it's, he goes, "Yeah, buddy, ducks." Like, that's it. Just acknowledging the comment. And I saw this video and I was like, oh my God, from a speech therapy perspective, this is gold. Like, this is
Absolutely
amazing. And we want that for our AAC kids too. We want, if they're, out at the grocery store or at church or at some place in public where you would be with your child, or at school, at therapy, we want to also see that commenting happening too, of them noticing something and telling you about it.
Yeah. It also works on labeling. I just kind of put that one together too, which is
totally
so great and important.
It's that expressive language, or not expressive, receptive function that we often overlook in AAC, because I think a lot of people get it twisted and think that an AAC device is really only about expressive communication. And even though that's the part that we're seeing the expressive output, the child has to have the receptive understanding of language to be able to get to the expressive part. So yeah, and that's something that we were kind of talking about with the new Informed SLP article.
Yes.
It's a really nice segue into that. So if we wanted to kind of like touch on that a little bit, we can.
Yes, take us there, Maggie.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so once again, we are back in the Informed SLP, our girl. I know that not everybody listening to this is going to have a subscription, and that stinks for you because it's a great website. If you're an SLP, you should absolutely invest in a subscription.
It's so worth it.
They are not paying us to promote them, but they definitely should because we love it.
If there is one Informed SLP, or two, how about this? If there are two Informed SLP fans, it's us. And if there are no SLP or Informed SLP fans, we are dead. Like that is
100%.
We love them so much.
Yes, Informed SLP, please sponsor us. Okay, so they just in their article, for their research review for this month, for March of 2026, they put out an article called Location, Location, Location. And this is about directly teaching the location of words on an AAC device, which is something that, yes, modeling, enhanced milieu teaching, all of that can do. But this article looks at a research study that was done about purposeful caregiver practice. So this was parents working on building fluency in modeling. And they note that modeling for AAC works best if it's fast, fluent, and embedded into interaction, kind of like how, Francie, you were like pantomiming earlier in this episode. Okay, I'm pausing.
It recommends, no, you're good. It recommends, or how they did it in the study was that they picked a couple targets and they hit it multiple times throughout like a week, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they pick a word, something that's meaningful to the child. They find the word in the AAC app, sometimes using the word finder if needed, which bless the word finder. I use it all the time. Practice accessing that word 3 to 4 times in the app, getting smooth in how you're accessing it, and then repeat it 10 times. And then jot down how they did. And they have a data sheet with this that's talking about this. But that navigation training that the caregivers provided resulted in kind of that increase in use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Structured explicit teaching led to faster AAC word learning. It also, let's see here, the structured sessions were 50% longer than incidental teaching sessions, even though the same number of learning opportunities occurred in both cases. So this suggests that describing how to navigate to a symbol may have made the difference in the structured intervention, which is so exciting.
Yeah. And the reason why I thought about this is because it really hits on structured, explicit instruction. And this is something that you and I will both do in therapy sessions to help build the receptive understanding for our student. Because if we're thinking about especially early intervention, early childhood, so these are our kids like birth through 7 is kind of that range. They are still pre-literacy, most of them. So they're not reading what is written in the AAC device. And some of them are still developing that symbolic representation skill. So a lot of AAC systems have little symbols, little icon pictures that help pre-literate users know what the button is for. But a lot of our kids are even pre-symbol recognition, or like if we're working with a 2 or 3-year-old that has some learning differences and some delays, we are working on building that like symbol representation skill. So teaching them the pathway to get to a vocabulary word and then mapping that icon and auditory word onto a real life object or action is huge for teaching the receptive understanding of it. So this review kind of gets into like the direct teaching of it, because sometimes modeling with or without expectation isn't enough. It's like the talking through. I think they had an example in here. Oh, you want to say monkey, touch dog, then zoo, then monkey, and demonstrating the meaning of that word.
Or the pathway. They used LAMP in this study. And so, which has very specific pathways, and talking through is helping to kind of map that word receptively and expressively.
Yeah. And I think especially with LAMP, the parent or caregiver practice is going to be huge, because LAMP is not intuitive. Like, at least for me, it's not semantically organized. Like, it's not organized really by category all the time. Sometimes it is, but I find LAMP difficult to navigate as a therapist who works with LAMP all the time. So if you're a parent who knows nothing about AAC and then is suddenly handed a LAMP device, I think this article shows that practice absolutely is worth it. And that was practicing with the device when the child was not present. So maybe like the kid's down for a nap or they're asleep and you have some time to, sit down for 10 minutes and explore the device yourself. Yeah. That can be very helpful in then teaching your child how to use the device as well.
And one of the things too that I like about this article is that it highlights just a few words. Like, it's not many, just a few words practiced multiple times. And I feel like with communication in AAC and with our students who are non-speaking, it feels kind of like an insurmountable task, both for providers and for parents, to be like, how are we going to eat this whole elephant of getting this child to communicate? And this article perfectly highlights that it really is one bite at a time. It's one word at a time.
Yes, that is such a crazy figure of speech, and I love it. How are we going to eat this elephant one bite at a time?
And it's one word at a time. It's learning the pathway to one word at a time.
And something I want to point out too is that I was thinking about this. I was telling you earlier, I had the chance to observe a student who has a little bit more proficiency with their AAC device than the students that are currently on my caseload. I have a lot of beginning communicators where we're doing a lot of this, what we're talking about. We're directly teaching AAC. And I had the chance to observe this student that was a little bit just further down the line, further along in the journey. And where was I going with this?
Moving
this
beyond
is where
teaching. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the how to eat an elephant thing. I think that we also, as therapists and also caregivers and other teachers, therapists, etc., need to realize that it's not necessarily going to look like how verbal speech develops, where kids start with 1 or 2 word phrases. Well, 1 word phrases, move on to 2 word phrases. They start adding grammatical markers. It gets longer and longer and more complex until they're speaking in full sentences like we are now. That's not how AAC develops. And it's helpful for me to think about AAC as another language with different grammatical structures and different syntactic, so like sentence expectations. And I think if we get to the point with an AAC user where we started off not speaking at all, right? Very little reliable communication, perhaps, and that's why we ended up going down the route of AAC. If we can get to the point where they have 5 words, 10 words, getting up to 50 words, starting to put 2 together, and we get a handful of like 2 word phrases or 3 word phrases that are reliable, readily available for them, and meaningful to the people around them, that is exponentially more than what we started with. So even if it's not every single word in the device, it's still communication, and it's still improving their quality of social relationships, their independence, their ability to self-advocate 1,000 times more than having no reliable form of communication, right? So it's just kind of like reframing expectations, I think, and not in a bad way, just in a way.
No,
AAC is just different.
AAC is different, and everybody's going to communicate differently. And I think I emphasize this a lot in my own practice, which is we really have to work on a person by person basis because it's going to be different for everybody. And so maybe you do have a student who is getting to using conventional grammar and is now switching from icon selection to typing, which is so exciting. But some
Yeah.
of my kids won't do that, and that's okay too. And so acknowledging that we are going to meet a child where they're at and take them as far as they can go. And that's wonderful, but that's different for everybody. And that's going to look different for everybody. But all of it is valid and all of it's just as important as every other skill that we have targeted. So,
yeah, 100%. And even if a kiddo has been working on AAC for a year or two, and they're only using it to request a handful of wants and needs, that handful of wants and needs is more than they were doing before. And it's a great place to continue building. So I think it's just, kind of going one step at a time or one bite at a time and figuring out what is most functional and most impactful for each student that's working with it. Yeah.
beautifully said.
Love AAC. It is a fantastic tool that we as therapists have in our tool belt to help the kids in our caseload. Yeah. It's not as simple as just handing a kid an iPad and expecting them to take off.
There is direct teaching involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, France, any final thoughts on this?
AAC takes time. I feel like the patience is the hardest part of AAC because when we compare it to oral language, it seems like it takes so much longer, and it does, and that's not a bad thing, but we have to be patient. And so stick with it, do some direct teaching. We will get there, but don't give up hope just because it takes a little bit longer.
Amen. I would just, echo everything that you just said. That's brilliant.
And also model all the time.
Model all the time. Yes. All right. Well, we hope that this clears up a little bit of confusion around AAC, and we will continue talking about this topic for the next couple of episodes because it's something that's really close to our hearts and also very important for the people that we serve. So we are available on YouTube and Spotify under Tell Me About It, an SLP podcast, and you can follow us on Instagram at Tell Me About It SLP. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.